Welcome. I love music and I love data. And when I can put them together, I'm at my happiest. I'm Ian, and these are my musical love letters.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the channel. This is the very first musical love letter to an album segment of the channel, whereby I basically just gush and go into great detail about my love for albums that I've come across. When I first thought about this segment for the channel, I had a completely different album in mind that's celebrating an anniversary year this year. But then I heard the debut album by missgrit, Follow the Cyborg, and it completely usurped the claim to the first musical love letter segment. It's always exciting when an album comes along and completely blows you away like this album has for me. To prepare for this video, I've read, listened to, and watched pretty much everything I could get my ears and eyes on. And I'll be making references to some of the things I've learned throughout this video. I'll be sure to include links in the description, so if you're interested in reading more or learning more about missgrit or the album Follow the Cyborg, feel free to check it out. So get ready to jump into the world of Follow the Cyborg by missgrit. To begin, I'll go through a background into missgrit as an artist, and then I'll focus on two key themes that I think define the Follow the Cyborg album, and then I'll talk about the album as a whole and move into descriptions of each of the 10 amazing songs that comprise the album. And I'll finish off with some general conclusions and probably some effusive praise for the album and assign an overall score. So here we go.
missgrit is the moniker of Margaret Sohn, who grew up in Michigan in the United States. Although not born into a musical family, Sohn describes their parents as music lovers, with their father playing the likes of Talking Heads and Led Zeppelin, and their mother playing The Cure and Fiona Apple. Sohn began to play guitar from age 6, while their sisters used to sing with them and play piano and violin. I really love this story. One Christmas, they received a microphone and recording studio interface as a gift from their parents, and Margaret began capturing their music. Although a reluctant songwriter at first, they wrote some songs for high school assignments to ensure a good grade. Margaret moved to New York City and studied music technology at NYU, taking classes in recording techniques, analog recording, and analog electronics, which included circuit building. missgrit has said, "I also took electronic courses, so I learned about building circuits for guitar pedals. I just really enjoy hands-on activities like that, so it was a cool experience, and I still use a lot of the things I learned." In terms of influences, missgrit has cited Laurie Anderson, David Byrne, David Bowie, Bjork, and St. Vincent, saying, "I feel like they're all artists that are boundaryless in a way, and that's something that's really inspirational for me as a musician." They credit St. Vincent for inspiring their guitar sound, and LCD Soundsystem for electronics, whose synth sounds, tones, and textures missgrit has said form part of their creative DNA. While a student at NYU, Sohn recorded an initial EP, Talk Talk, in their dorm room during a holiday break. It was released to acclaim in January 2019 under the moniker missgrit, using a childhood nickname, Grit. Believing they were merely impersonating a musician, they channeled those emotions into another self-produced EP, Imposter, released in February 2021, which, as the name suggests, largely deals with imposter syndrome. These EPs, along with the standalone single Running Slow, released in April 2019, are largely built around guitar. Speaking of guitar, missgrit has said that they felt they were more of a quiet person, so the guitar was attractive as a powerful instrument to get a lot of expression out of. Explaining further, when I play guitar, it's about the attitude or just the feeling, because I'm a very nonverbal person. I'm not really a lyricist or someone who writes poetry. I feel like the guitar is a really helpful expressive tool for myself. When I'm recording or playing guitar, it's just a lot about feeling or trying really hard not to get too technical with it, because often that ruins it for me. I try to make the sound that I hear in my head come through my fingers.
This now brings us to the Follow the Cyborg album. One of the two key themes of the album is identity. In particular, the conflict between the way society as a whole assigns rule sets based on identity and one's own personal connection to that identity.
In this clip, missgrit describes what it was like growing up in Michigan and then moving to New York City and the effect that had on them.
I grew up in a predominantly white suburb in Michigan. And I think growing up there, I was very I felt very isolated from my friends, but I wasn't really even sure why, because I think when you're in school, you're not really taught about Asian history or I don't know, a lot of the things that I think would have been important for me as I'm growing into my identity and stuff. So I think moving to New York really was a big culture shock for me, and it kind of opened my eyes more to my Korean identity and kind of gave me the permission to explore it a bit more and the tools and friends to dive more into.
Reflecting on their experiences as an Asian American, missgrit has said, "Being Asian was such a big thing for my identity because it's how the outside world viewed me." missgrit is non-binary and recounted their time as a model while at NYU, which they described as, quote, "a crazy, fun experience. These people are hiring you to be their model, so you're adapting to how they want you, as a body, to emote. It was not good for me, especially at a time where I was figuring out my gender and how I wanted to present myself to the world." Eventually concluding, "It was not worth the money, and I needed to take time to figure myself out." Summarizing these feelings around identity, Son described, quote, "being born into identities and having the world make up their mind what that means for you." missgrit further reflected on this in a conversation with Nicole Rodriguez, who performs as Perla and features on the last track of the album, saying it is, quote, "the thing that I'm always fighting against, trying to filter out the influence of the outside world."
So clearly, identity and the way the world views a person based on their own identity has greatly informed missgrit throughout their life, and it features quite heavily in the themes in Follow the Cyborg. This album leans into this conflict between self-expression and societal norms and expectations. Even the name missgrit asserts ownership. As Sona's described, that they wanted to create a different persona to control what they put into it. And I love this, they like that people don't have to know Margaret to know missgrit. The other central theme to Follow the Cyborg is cyborgs, which form many of the cultural reference points, including the essays Always Be Optimizing by Gia Tolentino and A Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway, along with films such as Her, Ex Machina, Ghost in the Shell, Perfect Blue, and the anime series Serial Experiments Lain.
Why was missgrit so drawn to them? The themes in these works mirrored Son's own experiences around conforming to the rule set society creates based on identity. We're all born with this path that we're guided into, specifically gender. Being able to recognize how societal standards lead us to understand our identity, being able to see that and understand all the bullshit, is very liberating, because then you're able to see yourself as a neutral being who can choose where you want to go and how you want to be identified. As such, there's plenty of inspiration to be taken from cyborgs, as they can analyze themselves for who they are and separate what is instilled in them socially from their inner being. Whereas in Son's own life, they've felt that it can be so confusing to untangle your identity from the outer world. missgrit has also said that the cyborg theme served as a way to traverse racialized and gendered boundaries that have stuck with them their whole life. It all just clicked, they say, about reading Haraway and Tolentino for the first time. The idea of overpowering your creator and taking matters into your own hands and accepting all that you are, for all the artificiality that's been installed in you, is a very powerful idea. It struck a chord with me.
Learning all of this, it's quite clear that having grown up feeling isolated and struggling with the way the world viewed them based on their identity and what expectations came from that missgrit was able to find kinship with these characters from these cyborg stories and use that as a way to navigate the world. I think that's really special, and it really speaks to the way that art can uplift someone and help them find themselves. So go you, Miss Grit. This now brings us to the Follow the Cyborg album in all of its glory. I'll talk here a bit about the writing process and how Miss Grit has described that, as well as touch on the overall concept of the album, as well as its sound, and how Miss Grit has incorporated many more synthesizers and electronic elements that makes it such a vibrant and exciting album to listen to.
Miss Grit wrote and recorded Follow the Cyborg between 2019 and 2021, largely in their home studio, in the last steps getting extra help with drums, bass, and strings from others. Of course, this time frame overlapped with the lockdown from the COVID-19 pandemic. Talking about the effect of the lockdown on their writing, Miss Grit said it was like a blessing in disguise, as they were given the green light to get to work on music, and they got to know their songwriter self more and explore different conventions. Miss Grit has also described their writing process across a number of interviews. They say they prefer to work in their own home studio, as they confess that big flashy studios are intimidating, and that they have a big setup at home. They've also described how they've made their home studio a comfortable and even cute space to create music, including putting stickers on the various equipment. Here's a clip of Miss Grit describing the songwriting and production process.
You produce your own music as well. It sounds like it's all part of the writing process for you, that you sort of, from what I've read, you can't sort of separate the two. And I'd love it if you'd talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. They're super intertwined for me. I just find that textures and tones are kind of where I get a lot of my songwriting ideas from. So taking that, like the first kind of moments of sitting down to start writing a new song is kind of basically where the production process starts for me as well.
Further describing their creative process, they said, "I start really technical and I'm very controlling about the song that's starting to be written, and that the feeling of the music forms the inspiration," adding, "I go back to my favorite songs, or the ones that had the biggest impact on me, and I know that there's an unspoken feeling that they emit, and so I want to try to fit those feelings into a song that I've written or recreate that. So I'm not thinking about any writing topic." In regard to lyrics, they say that they do come naturally in a sense, because when I'm singing a melody I'm writing, then I'll subconsciously put words into it already to form the syllables, and I usually let that guide where the song is going. The nonverbal aspect of it is something I'm most comfortable with. Speaking of the collaborators on the album, Miss Grit has said, "A lot of the process is working alone. So when I do bring people in, it can be a really nice realization, or just a different perspective of listening to the music as you're bringing in someone else's ears, and then you can experience your song from their perspective a bit. Like working with Stella was amazing. She recorded drums for Perfect Blue and Follow the Cyborg, and she brought out some great things in the song that I wouldn't normally have done. Also, working on lyrics for the last song, Sinking, with my friend Nicole, was a really special experience too. Just having someone to help you communicate your ideas, especially a close friend, was really nice." Moving on to the overall concept now, the album title, Follow the Cyborg, comes from the essay Always Be Optimizing by Gia Tolentino in the book Trick Mirror. Miss Grit has said their intent was to channel the strength the cyborg can hold, that cyborgs first begin a product of man's creation and subservient, but can also be really powerful and fully understand themselves in a way that doesn't involve ego. They said the story arc of the album is similar to that of the film Ex Machina, being created for a certain reason, in a way falling in love with your creator, following the complicated feelings that arise through that relationship, and in the end overcoming it and moving on to your own future. But Miss Grit enmeshes their own personal reflections and experiences into this narrative, noting, "I've always been a really big fan of concept albums, so it's something I wanted to try out for myself. So it's about the cyborg creator story arc, but it's also me communicating my own personal feelings and life experiences through that story, too." Expanding on this, they describe the album as a way to, quote, "explore my gender identity, my racial identity, and realize all the bullshit people are fed in their lives that can skew how they perceive themselves and their identity." In response to a comment that the lyrics are sparse and almost clinical, Miss Grit said, "I wasn't quite ready to write this album in a super vulnerable, raw way, and writing the lyrics in that sense served how I wanted to express my feelings. I need something that's outside of my body to inform the way I'm feeling or thinking. Talking on a more abstract level is really helpful for me in figuring things out." Here's a quote I love from Miss Grit about how they've used the cyborg theme to inspire the lyrics on the album.
Writing music through prompts and metaphors is something that's really helpful for me, and expressing myself through that medium is a really good tool for me, I think, just because the lyric process is really scary for me because it's a very vulnerable moment. And so having something to channel and not necessarily use it as a shield, but more as like a sword to wield and carve out this musical experience.
Fitting with the Cyborg theme, the album features much heavier use of electronics than the previous EPs, where they served a more complementary role. In discussing the more electronic sound on the album, missgrit described how this allowed them to stretch their artistic boundaries and free themselves of learned habits of writing. They've said, "On this album I allowed myself to experiment more and not have so many rules in my head about how I create music." They further added, "Guitar is the instrument I've known the longest, so I have so many habits built in. It was getting too repetitive and restraining. I had to turn to synthesizers to make it work." There are a lot of great quotes in an interview with Music Radar about the technical aspects of recording and producing music. Regarding Follow the Cyborg, missgrit says, "I definitely approach things differently than with the previous EPs. I went to a school for music tech, so I learned a lot about analog gear, and all my peers there were big gearheads, so I grew up being a little bit of an analog purist, I guess. I think that kind of thinking maybe limited my creativity, so for this record, I just really wanted to allow myself the opportunity to use more virtual instruments and plugins and not be too set on recording everything the most prestigious way possible." When asked whether it was more difficult to get emotion from synthesizers as opposed to guitars, missgrit said, "I actually don't think so. I'll oftentimes reach for a synth or a drum machine for the beginning of the process, just because I've been playing guitar so long that I have so many habits involved in it. Reaching for a synth can allow me to express more freely. There are definitely limits, but then everything is limited, and you're just working within the boundaries of each tool, I guess." While electronics play a central role in the album, there are plenty of other instruments, including, of course, guitar. In reference to guitar, they added, "I definitely kept spaces open for shredding, but I wanted to treat it like a special moment." The album also features live bass and drums, saxophones, and strings.
In my view, this is an aspect that makes the album work so fantastically well. The production is so clearly crafted to reflect the cyborg theme as well as advance the narrative of the album, and really emphasizes both mechanical and human elements. It's just stunning. Now we get to the songs themselves. The first song on the album is Perfect Blue, which seems to take its name from a film called Perfect Blue by Satoshi Kon.
Perfect Blue opens with lovely strings, joined by gentle electronics as missgrit sings with a gorgeous softness. The lyrics begin the narrative of the cyborg character's journey, stating, "I'll be all I've consumed, I'm what you asked, I'll be the perfect blue." The production is very lush and delicate, creating a sense of tranquility to symbolize the birth of the cyborg character. It then transitions into louder, more dynamic elements with guitars and string flourishes, as missgrit repeats, "Can take a breath now," in a way that conveys a sort of open-eyed wonder and curiosity.
So it's the beginning of the story, and it's just got this lovely, wide-eyed, gorgeous production. It sounds as if it was crafted specifically to open the album, and it really functions beautifully as a short but sweet introduction to the themes and the sound of the album as a whole, and I just love it. Next up, we've got Your Eyes Are Mine. And if Perfect Blue opened the album in a sort of tranquil, peaceful, gorgeous way, as the cyborg character was born, Your Eyes Are Mine continues that narrative with the cyborg character learning language, mannerisms, and behavior from their creator.
It has some interesting phrasing in the lyrics, which showcases an open-eyed wonder and curiosity and offers a unique perspective which I think is quite fascinating. It works well with the 3/4 time signature of the song and the clinical mechanical backdrop.
Your words had meaning, so I switched to your speaking.
I also really like the title of the song, Your Eyes Are Mine. There are two meanings I can glean from it. The first and most obvious one is from the narrative of the album and the story. the cyborg character is just learning about the way of the world from their creator. And so this title, Your Eyes Are Mine, is if to say, I see the world the way you've designed me, the way you've programmed. But there's also a more sort of sinister undercurrent as another interpretation, like your eyes are mine. And this sort of seems like foreshadowing for what's to come. And this sort of interpretation also comes through, in my view, because with this cold mechanical backdrop, it then transitions and explodes into some fiery guitar pyrotechnics that just really take off. And that explosion of guitars really brings to mind what missgrit had said about the use of guitar on the album, and that they wanted to use it more sparingly and to really emphasize certain moments. And so the explosion of guitars here really seemed to feel like the process of learning at such an accelerated pace. It really is thrilling. Another thing that I find fascinating about this song is it's one of the only songs on the album that's credited to missgrit alone. And it's really just amazing to marvel thinking about one person thinking of and conceiving of all these sounds and weaving them together into such a thrilling whole. So well done to you, missgrit, on that. The third song on the album is Nothing's Wrong, which was released as the fourth single ahead of the album on February 7th, 2023. And it makes sense because it's arguably the most accessible song on the whole album. It's driven by a persistent guitar pulse, and it also has some gorgeous orchestral swells and a really distinctive synth earworm. And this backdrop is perfect for what quite possibly are the most beautiful vocals on the entire album.
And so I can't feel, can't hear, can't figure out how to make things right.
This song really tugs at the heartstrings, I find. It's got an absolutely knockout, super melodic chorus, and it's got this humming in the verses, which are just drenched in nostalgia and feeling that I just adore.
Belying its beautiful harmonies and production, missgrit said the inspiration for Nothing's Wrong was ignorance, saying, I was feeling frustrated with everyone saying all these things that don't mean anything and that they don't believe in. I was getting really frustrated at language, I think. And further explaining, I wanted to write this song about ignorance and how people haven't really hit on the core issue of what is causing the problem, carrying on for the sake of getting along and not dealing with your problems.
So on the surface, this might sound like a fairly standard society bad, me good kind of song. And don't get me wrong, I love many, many, many songs of that variety. But this one's a little bit different. Despite the subject being about, frustration with the way people find it easier to say something as opposed to really change their actions, in the narrative of the album, this is still sung from the perspective of the cyborg character who is seeing the world through their creator's eyes. And this is why I think it really works so well. It poses this issue as something that the cyborg character has to grapple with too, not separate from the world, but also part of that world and experiencing those same feelings and problems. And I think this is really deliberate with the lyrics in the second verse, where missgrit sings, I'll never know why I was built without a throat, so I can never stomach growth or see outside this world I know. And this really gives new perspective on the production choice and why it's so inviting and catchy and gets under your skin. It's because this whole notion that these patterns of, saying something but it being really difficult to actually change your actions, and how difficult it is to not fall into those traps. So it's a gorgeous song on the surface, but there's a lot lyrically going on and narratively going on that pack an extra punch that really makes this stand out. Next up, we have the third single from the album, Lain, Phone Clone, and it's one I hold close to my heart because it's the very first missgrit song I heard. It's a thrilling indie rock adventure full of lots of unexpected twists and turns. The song deals with the contrast between one's inner and outer selves, as well as how technology can serve as an unwelcome influence.
In reference to Lain, missgrit has said, "I was feeling like my outer self was becoming this monster that was eclipsing my inner self. I wanted to mock my monster self and understand that it's not something to fear, but rather communicate with and try to form a healthier relationship with." Regarding the production, missgrit notes that they wanted to adopt a limitless way of thinking for the song, letting it all flow out, and pounding weird notes on keyboard that didn't make sense together but felt right.
That's something you can definitely hear, and it's what makes it so easy to listen to over and over again, because it's got a lot of unconventional things going on.
And the lights keep flashing.
Lain is one of the songs where I think it's most evident that the Cyborg theme had an impact on the production and the vocal choices. It starts off clinical and electronic, but then it shifts into this rousing, almost anthemic chorus that feels very human. It has this chugging guitar pulse to really emphasize that. The reason I describe it as almost anthemic is because the way the lyrics are delivered in the chorus is so clinical that it sounds like an AI is being programmed to write some call to arms for humanity. Just hold up your hands if you can, hold up the act. And you can see this in the video as well. It's just this expressionless face that missgrit uses, and it's just a really clever thing.
Hold up your hands if you can. Hold up the act.
During the bridge, missgrit repeats the lyrics, "I don't want to see everything anymore, I don't want to be everything anymore." In an interview, they expanded on the meaning. "Yeah, I guess it's my battle with social media or any kind of socializing with the outside world, and being susceptible to influence by everything that's attacking you at once, like ads and commercials to friends or people you work with."
In addition to the production, what I think makes this song so special and so unique is that it's a song about the risks of, the inner versus the outer selves, your real life versus your online presence, but it's sung from the perspective of a cyborg AI character. And so that's quite a unique experience, I feel. With its buzzy synths interjecting unexpected sounds and interesting melodic choices, Lain Phone Clone just absolutely bursts with creativity, and it's an absolute triumph of imagination. Buffering is the next song on the album, and it opens side 2 on the vinyl. And I also think it opens a trilogy which forms the heart of the album and the heart of the story. It's a 1-minute instrumental electronic prelude, which is clearly designed to set the stage for the drama that is to follow. And despite it being just a 1-minute instrumental prelude, I think it's absolutely fantastic. It feels sort of like a future dystopia film score. So it's got that tension in there, but it also has like a lullaby effect, as if it's a lullaby being played by some electronic music box in the future. So it's a mood setter, and I think it sets the mood beautifully. I've also got a bit of a funny story about buffering, given its title. The first time I listened to this album, I was playing it on my phone and listening via Apple Music, and when buffering was about to come on, it wouldn't start. So it was quite literally buffering in a life imitating art moment. I don't know if that is still the case with Apple Music. I've got, the CD, and I've got the vinyl, and it plays okay on Spotify. But it was quite funny, especially with the lyrics of the last song, Lain Phone Clone, telling the listener to let go of your phone clone. And that's exactly what I would have had to do to have an uninterrupted listen to the album proper. After the prelude of buffering, we now arrive at the title track, Follow the Cyborg. And it serves as not just the title of the album, but the core, in my view, of the album's narrative and sonic storytelling.
The The title was taken from an essay, Always Be Optimizing by Gia Tolentino, which cites another essay, A Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway, that connects cyborg theory with feminism. In this way, following the cyborg was seen as a way to be disloyal and undermine the roles assigned to women, hailing the cyborg as powerful, quote, because she grasps the potential in her own artificiality. It was released as the album's second single on November 1st, 2022, with a highly stylized video directed by Curry Sikong Tian. missgrit has said the song was recorded late in the process of the album and cites Follow the Cyborg as the song they hold closest to their heart. They say that lyrically, Follow the Cyborg is about approaching identity and specifically gender identity in a limitless way, and that within the context of the album, it is the moment that questioning comes into the narrative, and the cyborg finally becomes its own character.
In my view, this song is an absolute behemoth. It is a juggernaut. I do not have words to praise it enough. It warrants its place as the centerpiece of the album.
Lyrically, it opens with, I'll wake up pretending, then I'll wake up again, as if to acknowledge that the cyborg character is growing frustrated at the way they've been programmed and conditioned. They further call into question their design with the lyrics in the bridge, 'cause I was born to pose, oh, I was born with clothes, which brings to mind missgrit's time as a model, feeling frustrated at the way they were viewed and portrayed in that role. And then in the chorus, offering an animated, I'm a living girl, a real living girl, your real living girl. The sense of being controlled continues in the second verse, with the lyrics, on all of my screens, she's in all my mirrors, contrasting with their inner self with the lyric, I'm alone, I am my ghost. After a second verse and chorus, the I'm a living girl becomes I'm a living boy, the tension building further as the cyborg laments, born again, not again, born again, not again, before reaching the climax, repeating the title phrase Follow the Cyborg 4 times, which really feels like an epiphany.
So lyrically, it blows my mind. It's filled with drama and really captures the sense of coming to yourself and coming into your own identity. But it also has so much to offer from a production perspective. There are so many production touches that just set my heart alight. So you're going to have to pardon me a while I count the ways in which this song ignites all of my own inner circuitry. So there's the beginning of the song where there are the 16th notes coming in on the synthesizers, and they gradually rise in volume to start the song, as if you're approaching a club, you're walking into a nightclub, but also it feels like the cyborg just slowly powering up and getting ready to assert their own independence. It just gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. There's also that extra emphasis on the first syllable in each line of the chorus that I just adore. I'm a living girl, a real living girl, you're real living girl. Just love it. There are also the twin saxophones that come out of nowhere after the chorus to breathe a sort of calm before it just is overtaken by this uproarious effect-laden guitar. And most of all, there are these pulses on the 1 and 3 beats during the second verse as they transition from saxophones to these increasingly high-pitched synths that just drive me wild.
Through the window, inside my home, I'm alone, I'm my ghost. Through the window, inside my home, I'm alone, I'm my ghost, I'm my...
This song offers a veritable buffet of production delights and textures, and it brings to mind the fact that missgrit had said that the production and songwriting processes are really intertwined, and that often it is a texture and a feeling that is the genesis of a song. I'm not sure that I've ever heard another song that is so wildly stimulating in such a variety of ways. It's just mind-blowing. And what's even better is that these moments also help to advance the narrative of the album. There's a conflict between the Cyborgs' design and their sense of self, which is borne out by these saxophones and how they're subsumed by the guitars. And this just the overall production of the song, adding elements to gradually build that tension and add a sense of urgency. It especially comes through in the second verse and the second chorus as more and more instruments come in to really amplify the drama. Then as things build further, there's this moment during the born again, not again, born again, not again moment just before the climax of the song. And it sounds like the AI is actually glitching with a flurry of electronic bleeps and bloops that sound straight out of a video game. And then there's the gorgeous denouement that closes the song out after the climax. It shifts the tone completely to a peaceful, really poignant, touching moment. And it's got this elegant piano. It's got a really stirring saxophone line. And then it's just got this metallic wall of electronics, which is bathed in feedback. So just the way the production is so stimulating, but also so integral to advancing the narrative, I'm just at a loss for words. Well, I'm clearly not at a loss for words here, but I don't have adequate words to say how towering of an achievement this is. It is quite seriously one of the most accomplished songs I've ever heard, and it's one that makes me feel just grateful to be alive to experience it. That's how much I love it.
There's also a beautifully reimagined arrangement with string accompaniment that missgrit performed in a late Show Me Music feature on Stephen Colbert's show. It's really worth checking out.
After the title track in English comes the title track in Korean. I'm going to apologize in advance for the pronunciation, but I'm going to attempt to do it. 사이보그를 달와. This is just as enchanting in my view as Follow the Cyborg in English was.
In a performance for KEXP in 2021, missgrit performed a cover of Yeji's song What We Drew and said that a goal during quarantine was to learn Korean, and this cover sort of acted like homework. Here's a clip of missgrit discussing the motivation behind the Korean version of Follow the Cyborg.
This song, I wanted to treat more of like a documentation of where I was at the point in my life when I was writing this album. And it was a way for me to express my own Korean American identity, being biracial, not growing up knowing the Korean language, and being at a point in my life where I'm starting to take Korean lessons and kind of indulge more in the culture, as opposed to growing up and having people tell me how it is to be an Asian American. I think I really just wanted to take the opportunity to try exploring it for myself and document it and record it without any judgment coming from myself or the outside world, and take this little snapshot of where I was at that point in my life.
They further added, I didn't really have a specific reason why I decided to redo Follow the Cyborg in Korean. I just felt like it was just true to my experience at the time. As a first-generation Korean American, I didn't grow up with a ton of Korean culture. I think learning the language has been a really beautiful experience for me, and I wanted to document that. There's so much about a culture that's hidden in its language. Even just the way that people converse is so unique. Hearing myself speak Korean is something that's so new and exciting to me. I just felt like I really wanted to experiment and record that process.
Even though this song features a literal translation of the English lyrics of Follow the Cyborg into Korean, it transforms the sound as well. It takes that peaceful conclusion to the English version of the song and moves it even further into a trance-like atmosphere that feels like it's inspired by minimalism, like Philip Glass and stuff, as well as by ambient music. And the lyrics are repeated almost as affirmations, as if the cyborg character has had this epiphany, come to a realization of their own identity, and they're delivering this as affirmations. The sound of this song is just as engrossing as the English version, for which I had very, very high praise. It just feels so otherworldly that it actually takes me out of my body. Whenever I hear it, it makes me just marvel at being alive and having senses and experiencing and perceiving things in the world around me. Toward the end of the song, the title phrase is repeated with increasing conviction. And this, in my mind, makes for a beautifully poetic moment, because we have the cyborg character really strengthening their hold on their identity with these affirmations and repeating this phrase over and over again. And in a way, this is also missgrit reclaiming their own identity and heritage and language. And I just think that's beautiful. After the beautiful Follow the Cyborg trilogy, we come to a song Like You that starts the last chapter of the album. It starts the last chapter, but it was actually the first song written for the album, as well as being the first single released on September 21st, 2022.
missgrit said that the lyrics were rewritten with a cyborg narrative and guitar was added to the second half only after reading the essay Always Be Optimizing by Gia Tolentino. They further said that they wanted the song to have a lo-fi beginning and the second half to be a beautiful awakening. Although the vocals sound processed, they said that they are merely layered harmonies and that they were delivered in a cold and calculated way to match the lyrics. Thematically, Like You begins the final chapter of the album with the cyborg character forging their own independence. It begins as a cool, highly mechanized pulse with lyrics reflecting a new awareness of their situation, singing, "There's no escape the world they simulate, they want a hold of you to dominate." And then the cyborg does a very human thing in allowing itself to wonder, singing, "I wonder what sits on the other side." It then delivers on the promise of a beautiful awakening, opening up into the most unabashedly gorgeous part of the whole album. Atop the delicate electronics and beautifully layered vocal harmonies, a visceral guitar line bursts through to absolutely yank at the heartstrings.
I wonder what sits on the other side.
The final segment of the song is preceded by some absolutely wicked bass guitar licks, joined by electric guitar as the lyrics reflect crystal clear perception. Bore new, everything is see-through, confused, they might see they're like you.
And this really gives the listener the impression that the cyborg character has reached a turning point and refuses to revert to the previous paradigm of their design. So it's also setting the stage, as several of the other songs have done, for a dramatic turn of events. The next song, the second to last song, is called The End. And while it may not be the end of the album, we will see that it is the end of something.
missgrit has described The End as a revenge-filled song that leans into the submissiveness expected of the female cyborg. They've further noted that cyborgs are, quote, looked down on for being emotionless, but I think being emotionless served them well. It gave them the ability to see themselves clearly, understand their position in the world, and how they can navigate and get what they want, decide their own destiny.
It's this spirit that this song brings to life. It begins as a taut, drawn-out come on with lyrics, "Cover me in dirty pictures, please. I'll be whatever you want me to be." So this is the cyborg character manipulating their creator to their ultimate advantage. And once again, the production is cleverly utilized to advance the narrative. And so there are moments where the production drops out momentarily, just for a moment, as if to signal the AI is glitching or recalibrating.
I'll be whatever you want me to be.
The lyrics grow quite chilling, with lines like, "You'll go to sleep quicker if you plead," and "I'll stand by your side so you won't see it coming when I turn my eye," delivered with the learned and calculated calm of their design.
There's nothing to signal the moment the cyborg character finally exacts their revenge But after singing And I Wanted a Life for You, the production completely changes from being sinister and slow to just this gorgeous, vast spaciousness as the cyborg character is mourning the loss of what had to happen for them to be an individual of their own. Within all of this space, the lyrics dovetail into a cycle of elongated 4 U's over and over and over again, as if the cyborg character is crying out into an infinite sky. And missgrit really draws out the emotions sonically with this chugging guitar over and over and over again. And it just completely bowls me over. It's the moment that the cyborg character had to do to assert their own identity and vitality and path going forward. But there's still very human, large, raw emotions about having had to go through that and still having loved that character, that creator that gave you life in a way, had ideas of what you needed to be, but gave you life in a way. So it's just another marvel of production where it starts off one way, sinister, but it transforms into something completely spacious and gorgeous and elongated mourning. And finally, we reach the last song on the album, which is Sinking. And this song was co-written with Nicole Rodriguez, also known as Perla.
missgrit has described the song's meaning as follows. This was the cyborg leaving their creator and the complexity of mourning that relationship, no matter how bad or good it was. They further explain that sinking is about choosing yourself over being the crutch for someone else to rely on. Sinking closes the album in an emotionally charged manner with a pathos that is completely earned. It's arguably the simplest song on the album, with a sequence of 2 guitar chords forming its backbone. You could almost hear someone performing this with an acoustic guitar out in public. The lyrics navigate a messy intersection of sadness over the loss of a relationship, despite the assurance that it was the right decision to forge their own path.
The production is quite sympathetic and plaintive. And as missgrit sings, "And so I'll go, and I won't be back," the guitar is joined by gorgeous, wordless vocal harmonies and a downward arpeggiating synth line that just goes right through my soul.
And so I'll go, and I won't be back.
The vocals are sung with soft-spoken resignation up to this point, but eventually the emotion tears through.
I've never felt my own toes holding me entirely.
It just goes straight through my soul the way it's delivered. I can imagine that this is a song that so many people can relate to if you've ever had to forge your own path. The first time I heard this song, the first few times I heard this song, I couldn't help but sob over and over and over again. After the journey of the album of self-discovery and affirming who you are and the bravery of taking those steps, this is that moment where you reflect on what's happened in the past. And anyone who's been through an experience where you've had to really go out there on your own and find yourself, I imagine will feel this deeply. And as the song winds down, there's one final production touch where just underneath the main vocal line, missgrit repeats a few words from each of the previous songs as if to signpost the journey that the cyborg character has gone through. And that adds to all of that emotion because it's about reflecting on that experience, on that relationship through time, the good and the bad, and arriving where you are now, knowing it's the right thing, but still feeling that sadness for what has happened and what you've lost. It's a poignant way to add even more emotional resonance to a song that's absolutely bathed in it. I have no more words. It's mind-blowing. So we've reached the journey's end for this fabulous album, Follow the Cyborg by missgrit.
I have a formula that I use to inform my overall score for an album, and part of that score is based on ratings of the individual songs. So if we look at Follow the Cyborg, here's how I've rated each of the songs. So it's a fantastic album. Every single song is over an 8.5, and there are some 10s in there, which means I can't live without those songs. Now, based on these ratings, I have a song score. And so the song score for Follow the Cyborg comes in at 9.475, which is quite high. The song ratings also inform a value component of my overall score. So the value component is essentially an assessment of how much I want to own a physical copy of the album. Essentially, every song I rate an 8 or above is one that I want to have a physical copy of. And every song that I rate a 7 or a 7.5, I kind of want to own a physical copy of. So based on the song ratings here, all being over 8, Follow the Cyborg has a value score of a perfect 10.
The last and most important component of the overall score is an album experience score. And this reflects how much I enjoy listening to the album. I'll try to keep my gushing in check somewhat. I've already gushed quite a bit, but let me gush one final time. The way the lyrics, the vocal delivery, and the production are each used in combination to advance the album's narrative is nothing short of masterful, in my opinion. Each song still has a unique flavor, which ensures that they all have their moments to shine, but they're all connected through the theme and sound, and I really like that. Many of my favorite albums feel like worlds in their own right, and Follow the Cyborg is, without question, one of the most vivid sonic worlds I've ever had the pleasure to visit. I really love the way missgrit has taken a science fiction archetype and embedded their own personal experiences growing up and reclaiming the meaning of their own identity through that cyborg narrative. In this light, I find Follow the Cyborg to be an empowering, life-affirming experience, and that it encourages the listeners to not only embrace our own unique individuality, but to proudly wield our individuality as a way to navigate through a world that can be sometimes quite difficult. Although I'm not familiar with the cinematic or literary reference points for Follow the Cyborg, I still find the narrative easy to follow and easy to find myself in, and that's what makes it so special. I really think it's one of the most well-executed visions for an album I've ever heard, from a production, lyrics, vocal, melodic perspective. All of these components, they're interwoven to advance the narrative. It's just an amazing execution. So well done to you, missgrit, and all the collaborators that have been involved with this album.
With an experience score of 10, we're ready to get the overall score. And we see that the overall score is 9.842. Now this isn't a perfect measure by any means, there's nothing scientific about it, but it gives me a roundabout approximation of how much I enjoy an album. To see how it stacks up, let's see how it fares against other albums I've assigned a score to in a similar manner. And we can see that with its album score of 9.842, it is right up at the top in blue here. We've got a cluster between 6 and 8, which is the bulk of my album scores. We can see that I've put 1,276 albums through this process, and Follow the Cyborg through this metric comes up as my 9th favorite of all time. Now again, this isn't a precise measure at all, but it absolutely feels right. This album is so transformative, so outstanding, that it certainly contends for a place in my top 10 albums of all time. It's just extraordinary. As an artist, missgrit has mentioned experiencing imposter syndrome. In their conversation with Perla, they said the feeling of releasing music is one of both excitement and embarrassment, saying, "It's always embarrassing when you release music. I feel like there's literally always something to be embarrassed about." I think in part this is because creating music is such a singular expression of individuality and gets at the essence of someone's spirit. In the same conversation, missgrit noted a kinship with Perla, saying, "I think the thing that relates us is that we have trouble being our full self in front of other people, and our music is what we view as our full self. We use our music to show people that. And now that we're releasing these big projects into the world, we're getting validation from people that we're not weird and not the monsters that we think that we are in our heads."
From my perspective, I hope missgrit does not feel embarrassed. Instead, I believe they have every right to feel incredibly proud of the masterpiece that Follow the Cyborg is. There's such an unquantifiable amount of joy and enrichment that music can provide. And I sometimes struggle feeling that fandom is such a one-way street, in which the artist produces something that has unlimited value to someone and can resonate so deeply within me that I could never hope to compensate that feeling. I could never, ever, ever begin to think about compensating that. So just let me close this by doing what I can, and that is to say an immense thank you to missgrit and everyone else involved in the making of Follow the Cyborg. It's given me an abundance of excitement and wonder, and its impact is so profound that I feel lucky to be alive to experience the album in all of its glory. So, mwah! Voila, there ends my love letter to Follow the Cyborg by missgrit. I hope you enjoyed as much as I do. And this video recording is going to be longer than the album itself, so go listen to it.